Elara lived in the quiet heart of Oakhaven, a town cradled by ancient oaks and whispered secrets. Her world was made of paper and ink, of hushed reverence and the scent of old stories. She was a librarian, a curator of dreams bound in leather and cloth, and her sanctuary was the Oakhaven Public Library. It wasn't a grand, imposing edifice, but a charming, ivy-clad building with stained glass windows that spilled jewel-toned light across worn wooden floors. Every morning, as the first rays of sun stretched through the eastern windows, Elara would walk amongst the silent stacks, her fingers trailing over spines, a soft smile gracing her lips. Oakhaven was a place where time seemed to slow, where the rustle of leaves was as important as any news bulletin, and where the past lingered like a sweet perfume. Elara fit perfectly into its rhythm. She was a woman of quiet grace, with eyes the color of moss after a rain, and hair the rich shade of autumn chestnuts, often tamed into a neat braid. Her days were a symphony of soft sounds, the turning of pages, the gentle tap of a keyboard, the murmur of a child discovering a new adventure. She loved the feeling of purpose that settled over her, connecting people to the stories that might change their lives, or simply brighten their day. But there was another sound, one Elara had only recently begun to notice, and it was far more elusive than the creak of old floorboards or the whisper of a turning page. It was Whis. It wasn't a human voice, not exactly. It was more a sensation, a fleeting, almost imperceptible hum that resonated in the air, particularly when the library was empty, or when she was deep in thought, alone in the history section. It was like the soft sigh of the wind through a forgotten chime, or the echo of a beautiful melody played long ago. Sometimes it felt like a brush of cool air against her cheek when no window was open, or a warmth that bloomed in her chest without explanation. It had no discernible source, no words she could grasp, yet it carried an unmistakable sense of comfort, of gentle presence. The first time she truly noticed it, she was reorganizing the oldest folios, books that smelled of dust and forgotten voyages. A whisper, so delicate it could have been her own breath, seemed to rise from the vellum pages, a feeling of ancient longing and quiet joy. She paused, her hand hovering, and looked around the vast echoing room. Nothing. Yet, the feeling lingered, a warmth in her chest, a soft hum beneath the silence. After that, the Whis became a quiet companion. It would manifest when she was lost in a particularly poignant passage, or when she found a forgotten bookmark pressed between pages. It seemed to resonate most strongly near the library's oldest inhabitants, the great antique globe in the reading nook, its oceans faded, its continents still proud, the towering grandfather clock in the entryway, its pendulum a steady heartbeat, and especially the sprawling oak tree outside, whose roots, legend had it, delved deep beneath the library's foundation. Elara, a practical woman at heart, initially dismissed it as her imagination running wild, a side effect of living amongst so many stories. Perhaps it was the building settling or the wind playing tricks. But the Whis was too consistent, too specific in its feeling. It wasn't spooky or unsettling, quite the opposite. It was profoundly soothing, like a secret understanding shared with the very soul of the library. It made her feel less alone, in a quiet, comforting way. It was a gentle reminder that some things couldn't be explained, only felt. One crisp autumn morning, a subtle shift occurred in the library's familiar rhythm. The air, usually filled with the whiz and the rustle of scholarly pursuits, gained a new note. A man walked in, and Elara, who was at the circulation desk, felt an immediate, almost electric awareness. It wasn't just his presence, it was the way the whiz seemed to intensify, humming a little louder, swirling around him like an invisible current. He was tall, with a kind of rugged elegance, dressed in simple, well-worn clothes that spoke of a life lived with purpose. His hair, the color of rich earth, fell a little over his brow, framing eyes the deep, thoughtful blue of a twilight sky. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, his gaze sweeping over the shelves with an appreciation that Elara instantly recognized. He wasn't just looking for a book, he was looking for a story, for a connection. He approached the desk, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. "Good morning," he said, and his voice was a low, warm rumble, like distant thunder on a summer day. "I'm new to Oakhaven. My name is Liam Thorne." Elara felt a blush creep up her neck, a rare occurrence. Good morning, Mr. Thorne. Welcome to Oakhaven. I'm Alara Vance, the librarian. Liam, please, he corrected, a gentle smile softening his features. And it's a pleasure to meet you, Alara. This is quite a library you have here. I've always been drawn to places with history, and this one feels alive. He said the word alive with a particular emphasis, and Alara's heart gave a little jump. Did he feel it too? The subtle thrum of the building, the echoes of lives lived within its walls? Or was it just her projecting her own feelings onto him? It is, she agreed, her voice a little breathy. It has a lot of stories, not just within the pages. She gestured vaguely around the room. Liam's eyes twinkled. I can tell. I'm actually looking for something specific. I've just bought the old Miller house on Juniper Lane and I'm trying to learn more about its history, perhaps some of Oakhaven's local lore. I'm a furniture restorer, and I like to understand the context of the pieces I work on, and the homes they come from. Alara's professional demeanor returned, though the warmth in her chest lingered. The Miller house. That's a beautiful old place. You're very brave to take it on. It's been empty for years. We have quite a collection of local history. Let me show you. She led him past the fiction stacks, towards the back corner where the Oakhaven archives were housed. The Whis seemed to follow them, a gentle hum that felt like an approving presence. As she walked, Alara was acutely aware of Liam's presence beside her, the subtle scent of wood smoke and clean linen that clung to him, the easy rhythm of his steps matching hers. Most of our local history is over here, she explained, pulling out a sliding shelf of thick, bound volumes. We have town records, old newspapers, family histories. The Miller family was quite prominent in the early days of Oakhaven. I remember seeing a mention of them in the founding documents. Liam nodded, his gaze intent on the shelves. Perfect. I want to respect the house's heritage, not just renovate it. I believe every old object, every old building has a spirit, a story waiting to be told. Alara looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a kindred spirit. I completely agree, she said, a genuine warmth spreading through her. I think stories are the most important things we have. They connect us to the past, to each other, and to ourselves. He smiled, a slow, gentle curve of his lips that reached his eyes. You clearly love what you do. More than anything, she confessed. It's not just about books, it's about the lives they touch, and the stories they tell, sometimes without even using words. She thought of the Whis, and wondered if he sensed that too. For the next hour, Alara helped Liam navigate the labyrinthine records of Oakhaven. She pulled out dusty ledgers, microfiche of old newspapers, and a worn-out map of the town from the late 1800s. They discovered that the Miller house had indeed been one of the first built in Oakhaven, owned by a shipwright who had settled inland, inexplicably, drawn by the quiet beauty of the oak forests. Liam was a patient and thorough researcher, his brow furrowed in concentration as he pored over documents. He asked insightful questions, and Alara found herself enjoying the intellectual sparring, the quiet camaraderie that bloomed between them over shared discoveries. She learned that he had moved to Oakhaven from a bustling city, seeking a slower pace, a place where he could connect more deeply with his craft. I needed a place where I could hear myself think, he explained, tracing a finger over a faded photograph of the Miller house, decades old, where the air felt clean and the silence wasn't empty, but full of something else. Full of what? Alara prompted, intrigued. He paused, looking up at her, a thoughtful expression in his blue eyes. I'm not entirely sure yet. A kind of hum, maybe. A sense of peace, but also a feeling of deep roots. Like the land remembers everything. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. The land does remember, she murmured, thinking of the Whis and the ancient oak outside the window. And so do the buildings, I think. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by the rustle of pages and the soft clatter of old photographs. When Liam finally gathered his research materials, a stack of photocopies and a few borrowed books, the afternoon sun was painting long shadows across the library floor. Thank you, Alara, he said, his voice sincere. This has been incredibly helpful, and truly, a pleasure. The pleasure was all mine, Liam, she replied, meaning every word. Her cheeks felt warm again. Let me know if you need anything else, or if you just want to talk about Oakhaven history. He smiled, That same gentle, heartwarming smile. "I suspect I'll be back. Often." He paused at the door, turning back to her. "You know," he said, his voice a little softer now, "when I walked in here, I felt something. A kind of whisper. Like the building was welcoming me. Or perhaps it was just the peace of it all." He gave a small, self-conscious shrug. "I'm probably imagining things." Elara's breath caught in her throat. The Whis. He felt it too. Or at least, he felt something akin to it. Her heart hammered a gentle rhythm against her ribs. "Perhaps," she said, her voice barely above a whisper herself. "Or perhaps, it's just Oakhaven." He held her gaze for a moment longer, a question in his eyes, or perhaps an understanding. Then, with a nod, he was gone, leaving behind a faint scent of wood smoke and a library that felt suddenly, wonderfully, less quiet. Elara stood by the circulation desk long after he'd left, her hand resting on the cool surface of the wood. The Whis was undeniably stronger now, a joyful, vibrant hum that seemed to emanate from every corner of the room. It wasn't just a soothing presence anymore. It felt like a secret shared, a promise whispered on the wind. She thought of Liam Thorne, with his kind eyes and his appreciation for old stories and the hum of Oakhaven. She thought of his hands, strong and capable, the hands of a craftsman who brought life back to forgotten things. And she thought of his smile, which had made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way she hadn't realized she longed for. All her life, Elara had immersed herself in the grand romances, the epic adventures, and the quiet triumphs contained within the library's walls. She had loved the characters, lived their joys and sorrows, but always from a gentle distance. Now, standing alone in the golden light of the setting sun, with the Whis singing softly around her, she felt a new story beginning to unfold, one that might be her very own. A story that smelled of old wood and fresh beginnings, and the quiet, undeniable magic of a whisper. The library was quiet once more, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was a quiet filled with potential, with the echoes of a deep voice and the promise of a return. Elara found herself humming a wordless tune, a melody that felt as ancient and comforting as the Whis itself. She looked towards the tall arched windows, where the ancient oak tree stood sentinel, its leaves rustling in the evening breeze, as if sharing a secret. And in the heart of Oakhaven, amongst the timeless stories, a new one was just beginning to unfurl its delicate, hopeful pages. The morning sun, usually a welcome burst of golden light in Oakhaven, felt different to Elara today. It wasn't just light, it was an invitation, a hushed promise whispered on the breeze. She'd woken with a lightness in her chest she hadn't realized was missing, a subtle hum beneath her usual calm. Leo's voice, a rich baritone, still resonated in her memory, and the image of his kind eyes and the easy curve of his smile kept replaying. She moved through her morning ritual with an unusual spring in her step. Downstairs, the scent of old paper and brewing coffee mingled, a familiar comfort, yet today it felt imbued with a new layer of anticipation. The shop, usually just her sanctuary, now felt like a stage, set for a return. She dusted the shelves with a meticulousness that bordered on the obsessive, rearranged the display of new arrivals, and even polished the brass nameplate outside, something she usually reserved for weekly chores. The Whis, her ancient and beloved companion, seemed to rustle its pages with a knowing air whenever she passed, as if it too awaited the next chapter. By mid-morning, a quiet restlessness settled over her. Was he truly coming back? He'd said he would, but promises made in the glow of shared laughter could sometimes fade with the stark light of day. Elara chastised herself for the sudden vulnerability, a feeling she rarely allowed herself to entertain. Her life in Oakhaven was one of gentle routine and predictable joys. This flutter in her heart felt wonderfully, terrifyingly new. Just as she was considering brewing a second pot of tea, a sure sign of nervous energy, the bell above the door chimed. Elara's heart gave a distinct leap, a tiny, joyful rebellion against her composure. She turned, a smile already forming on her lips, only to find Mrs. Gable, a sweet, spectacled woman who ran the local bakery, clutching a book on Victorian embroidery. "Good morning, Elara dear," Mrs. Gable chirped, oblivious to Elara's internal sigh of mingled relief and disappointment. "Just returning this. Finished it last night. Absolutely delightful. Elara managed a genuine smile. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Mrs. Gable. Anything else catching your eye today? Mrs. Gable browsed for a while, chatting about the rising price of flour and the impending village fete. Elara listened, offered suggestions, and processed the sale. All the while, her senses were acutely tuned to the door, to the street outside. It was almost noon when the bell chimed again, and this time, it was unmistakably him. Leo stood in the doorway, framed by the bright sunlight, a casual canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He wore a soft linen shirt the color of seafoam, and his smile, when it met hers, was exactly as she remembered, warm, genuine, and just a little bit mischievous. Good morning, Elara, he said, his voice a balm to her waiting heart. Hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Leo, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Just admiring the quiet. Oakhaven has a way of settling into itself around lunchtime. He stepped inside, and the shop seemed to breathe a little deeper, the air suddenly charged with a different kind of energy. It's a beautiful quiet, he agreed, his gaze sweeping over the shelves, lingering on the Whis. I brought back the book. He reached into his bag and produced the worn copy of Tales of the Forgotten Glade, and a little something extra. He pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird, no bigger than her thumb. Found it at a little antique shop on my way back to the cottage this morning. Thought it might like a home amongst your stories. Elara took the bird, her fingers brushing against his as she did. The wood was smooth and warm, a tiny, perfect piece of artistry. It's beautiful, Leo. Thank you. She found herself placing it gently on the spine of the Whis, nestled amongst its ancient pages. It felt like a tiny, secret offering. So, he began, his eyes twinkling, what ancient wisdom am I to be graced with today? Or perhaps something more contemporary. I'm open to suggestions. Elara laughed. A light, genuine sound. Always so eager to be enlightened. Tell me, what kind of stories usually draw you in? He leaned against a sturdy oak bookshelf, arms crossed, a comfortable posture that made him seem utterly at home. I'm a bit of an old soul, I suppose. Love a good historical fiction. Anything with a touch of magic woven into the mundane. And poetry, when the mood strikes. But I also have a soft spot for travelogues, especially those from eras when the world still felt vast and undiscovered. A man of varied tastes, Elara observed, already mentally sifting through the thousands of titles around them. I think I have just the thing. She led him towards a quieter corner of the shop, where a collection of classic travel narratives resided. Have you ever read Isabella Bird? Her journeys in Persia and Kurdistan is remarkable. A woman traveling alone in the late 19th century with such wit and bravery. Leo's eyes lit up as he pulled the book from the shelf. Isabella Bird. I've heard of her but never had the pleasure. This sounds perfect. He opened it, flipping through the delicate pages, a faint smile playing on his lips. You know, Elara, you have a gift for this. It's more than just knowing where the books are. It's like you understand the stories they hold, and the stories people need to hear. His compliment warmed her to her core. It's a privilege, really, she admitted, her gaze sweeping over her beloved shop. These books, this place, they've been my companions for as long as I can remember. My parents owned Oakhaven before me. I grew up amongst these pages. That explains the effortless charm, he said softly, looking at her with an intensity that made her cheeks flush. It's not just a business for you, is it? No, she confessed, meeting his gaze. It's home. It's history. It's a refuge. She paused, then, feeling a sudden urge to share something more personal. After my parents passed, the shop became even more vital. It felt like holding onto a piece of them, a piece of what they love. A gentle sadness softened his eyes. I understand that. Losing someone you love, it leaves a permanent echo. He didn't pry, just offered a quiet understanding that was infinitely more comforting than any platitude. And you've kept their legacy beautifully. This place feels like a warm embrace. They fell into a comfortable silence, Leo still perusing the Isabella Bird, Elara watching him, a sense of peace settling over her. He truly seemed to appreciate the atmosphere, the history, the very soul of Oakhaven. Do you live in Oakhaven, Elara? He asked, looking up from the book. Just above the shop, she gestured upwards. It's convenient if nothing else. She smiled. And I have the best commute in the world. I can imagine, he chuckled. I'm staying in a little cottage just outside the village for a few weeks. Needed a change of scenery, a break from everything really. I'm a writer, mostly academic papers, but I dabble in fiction. A writer. Elara exclaimed, genuinely delighted. That's wonderful. What kind of fiction do you write? He shrugged, a self-deprecating smile on his face. Mostly historical, actually. Trying to finish a novel set in the late 18th century about a cartographer who discovers a lost map leading to a mythical garden. Very much still in the struggling phase, I'm afraid. A lost map and a mythical garden? Elara's imagination sparked. That sounds absolutely enchanting, Leo. Oakhaven is probably the perfect place to find inspiration, with all its hidden stories. That's exactly what I was hoping, he admitted, his eyes crinkling at the corners. There's a certain magic here, isn't there? A sense that the past isn't quite past. He glanced at the Whis. Especially with that magnificent volume. The Whis, Elara confirmed, her voice softening. It certainly holds more than just paper and ink. My mother always said it was the heart of Oakhaven, full of untold stories and ancient memories. Some days, I swear it whispers to me. She immediately felt a pang of self-consciousness, worried he might think she was a little odd. But Leo just nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. I believe it. Some places, some objects, they just resonate with an energy. I felt it the moment I stepped in. He walked over to the Whis, running a gentle hand over its worn leather cover. What kind of stories does it whisper to you? Elara hesitated, then decided to embrace the shared moment of wonder. Sometimes it's just a feeling, a sense of deep history. Other times, it's almost like it guides me to a particular book for a particular person, or helps me find the answer to a question I didn't even know I had. My parents used to say it had a memory, a spirit of its own. Spirit of its own. And you believe them? He asked, not with skepticism, but with genuine curiosity. More and more as I get older, she confessed, a soft smile playing on her lips. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? That some things truly are timeless and hold secrets beyond our understanding. Utterly comforting, he agreed, turning to face her fully. It reminds me of why I love stories so much. They connect us to something larger than ourselves, to the collective human experience, and sometimes, to a little bit of magic. Their conversation flowed effortlessly from there, meandering through topics ranging from the nuances of historical research to the best way to brew a truly perfect cup of Earl Grey. Elara found herself sharing anecdotes about Oakhaven's eccentric residents, and Leo spoke of his travels, of remote libraries he'd visited, and the thrill of unearthing a forgotten historical detail. He had a way of listening that made her feel entirely seen, entirely heard, and his quick, intelligent responses sparked new thoughts within her. The afternoon slipped by, marked only by the shifting light through the tall windows, and the occasional chime of the shop bell, though most visitors seemed to sense the quiet communion and move through the aisles with respectful, hushed tones. Elara even found herself offering Leo a cup of tea, which he gratefully accepted, settling into a comfortable armchair near the fireplace while she sat across from him. You know, Leo said, swirling his teacup, I've been looking for a particular kind of map for my novel. Something that feels truly ancient, hand-drawn, with intricate details of flora and fauna. I've scoured archives, but nothing has quite captured the essence I'm looking for. Elara's eyes brightened. A map, you say? I might have just the thing, or rather the Whis might. She stood, a spark of inspiration guiding her. Follow me. She led him to a section of the shop dedicated to rare and antique books, often kept under lock and key, though she rarely needed to use it. At the very back, nestled amongst leather-bound atlases and botanical prints, was a large, flat portfolio. It wasn't a book, but a collection of loose-leaf maps and sketches, carefully preserved. This belonged to my great-great-grandfather, Elara explained, gently untying the ribbon that held the portfolio shut. He was an amateur cartographer and botanist, traveled extensively, though mostly within England, charting forgotten woodlands and documenting rare plants. She opened it, revealing a treasure trove of delicate parchment, hand-colored with an exquisite attention to detail. Leo gasped softly, his eyes wide with awe. Elara, these are incredible. The artistry, the precision. He carefully lifted one map, depicting a fantastical woodland, complete with tiny, labeled sprites and shimmering waterfalls that seemed to flow off the page. This is exactly the kind of detail I've been dreaming of. Look at these annotations, these tiny sketches of mythical creatures hidden in the foliage. He had a vivid imagination, Elara said, a wistful smile on her face. My grandmother used to tell me he believed he was charting not just the physical world, but the unseen one too. Leo spent a long time poring over the maps, his brow furrowed in concentration, a look of pure delight on his face. He pointed out particular features, asking Elara about her great-great-grandfather's life, his methods, his beliefs. Elara found herself sharing family stories she hadn't thought about in years, tales of her ancestors' eccentricities and his unwavering belief in the magic of the natural world. This one, Leo said, pointing to a map depicting a dense forest with a single glowing clearing at its heart, this is almost exactly what I've envisioned for the mythical garden in my story. The way the light is depicted, the subtle hint of something ethereal. It's perfect. He looked up at her, his expression earnest. Elara, would it be possible? Would you ever consider letting me borrow one or two of these, just for a few days, to study the style, the technique? I would be incredibly careful, of course. Elara hesitated. These maps were priceless, not just in monetary value, but in sentimental worth. They were a direct link to her family's past, a testament to their own unique connection to the world of stories and wonder. Yet, looking at Leo's sincere face, at the genuine passion in his eyes, she felt an instinct to trust him. It wasn't just about lending a book. It was about sharing a piece of her heritage, a part of her soul. My great-great-grandfather would have loved that his work inspired another storyteller, she said, a warmth spreading through her chest. Yes, Leo, you can borrow a few, but you must promise to treat them with the utmost care, as if they were fragile dreams. A broad, genuine smile broke across his face, lighting up his eyes. I promise, Elara. With my life, thank you. This means the world to me. He carefully selected two maps, one of the fantastical woodland, and another depicting a series of interconnected caves, each labeled with cryptic, poetic names. As he reverently placed them back into his canvas bag, Elara felt a surprising sense of rightness. It was as if the maps, dormant for so long, had been waiting for this very moment, waiting to inspire a new generation of tales. As the afternoon began its slow descent into evening, Leo finally prepared to leave. He had bought Isabella Bird's book and another volume of historical essays, his bag now heavier with both his new purchases and the precious maps. I've taken up far too much of your time today, Elara, he said, a hint of regret in his voice. But I truly can't thank you enough for the books, the tea, the conversation, and especially for sharing your family's treasures. It was a pleasure, Leo, she replied honestly, feeling a pang of longing at the thought of his departure. The shop would feel quieter again, a little less vibrant. Come back anytime. Oakhaven is always open. He paused at the doorway, turning to face her. The golden light of the setting sun caught the dust motes dancing in the air around him, making him seem almost ethereal. I will, he said, his gaze lingering on hers. And Elara, perhaps tomorrow evening, if you're free, we could meet for dinner? There's a charming little pub just down the lane, the Golden Acorn. I'd love to hear more of Oakhaven's stories, and perhaps share a few of my own. Her heart did another little leap, a joyful affirmation, a real invitation. I'd like that very much, Leo, she managed, a soft blush rising to her cheeks. The Golden Acorn tomorrow evening, around 7? 7 sounds perfect, he confirmed, his smile widening. Until then, Elara. With a final lingering look, he stepped out, and the bell chimed once more, a cheerful, hopeful sound. Elara watched him walk down the lane until he disappeared from view, his figure silhouetted against the deepening gold of the evening light. The shop, though now truly quiet, no longer felt empty. It felt full, brimming with the echoes of shared laughter, the warmth of genuine connection, and the exciting hum of possibility. She tidied up, her movements imbued with a gentle grace, her mind replaying snippets of their conversation. Leo's genuine interest, his kind eyes, his passion for stories and history, all of it resonated deeply within her. She looked at the Whis, its ancient pages now home to the tiny wooden bird he'd given her. It felt like a tangible link, a quiet promise. She reached out, gently touching the bird, and then running her fingers over the spine of the Whis. A subtle warmth emanated from the book, a feeling of contentment, as if it approved of the unfolding story. As darkness gathered outside, Elara climbed the stairs to her apartment, a lightness in her step. She gazed out her window at the ancient oak tree, its leaves rustling in the soft breeze, a silent witness to the daily rhythms of Oakhaven. Tonight, the rustling sounded less like a secret and more like a gentle melody, a lullaby for a heart that had found a new reason to hope. The scent of old books and blooming night jasmine drifted up from the garden, a comforting embrace. And as she drifted off to sleep, she carried with her the image of Leo's smile, the warmth of his presence, and the quiet certainty that Oakhaven, in its timeless way. The soft light of morning filtered through Elara's lace curtains, painting delicate patterns across her bedroom floor. She stirred, a smile already gracing her lips before her eyes even fully opened. The image of Leo's smile, the gentle curve of his lips, the warmth in his hazel eyes, was the first thing her mind offered her. It was a comforting thought, a quiet beacon that had guided her into sleep and now welcomed her back to consciousness. The rustling outside was no longer a secret, but a familiar whisper of the wind through the old oak, a friend. She stretched, feeling a lightness in her limbs she hadn't experienced in years. The scent of night jasmine still clung faintly to the air, a sweet reminder of the previous evening's peace. Oakhaven, in its timeless way, was indeed weaving a new story, and for the first time in a long time, Elara felt like a willing participant, not just an observer. After a slow, unhurried breakfast of warm toast and Earl Grey tea, Elara moved through her morning routine with a renewed spring in her step. She watered her small collection of potted herbs on the kitchen windowsill, their verdant leaves glistening in the sunlight. Each task, usually a quiet ritual, felt imbued with a new sense of purpose. Her reflection in the antique mirror above her dresser seemed to hold a brighter spark in its gaze, a subtle softening around the eyes. She chose a dress of soft periwinkle, a color that always made her feel calm and collected, but today it felt like a declaration of gentle optimism. The library, when she arrived, was already bustling with its usual morning rhythm. Mrs. Gable, Oakhaven's resident fount of all information and amiable gossip, was at the circulation desk, her spectacles perched on the end of her nose as she meticulously sorted through a pile of returned paperbacks. "Morning, Elara, dear," Mrs. Gable chirped, her eyes twinkling. "You're looking positively radiant today. Spring in your step, I see." She paused, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Heard you had a lovely chat with Mr. Maxwell yesterday evening. A charming man, isn't he? So attentive." Elara felt a blush creep up her neck, but she merely smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "He is, Mrs. Gable. We were just discussing the history of the old mill building." She deliberately kept her answer vague, knowing Mrs. Gable would fill in the blanks with her own romantic imaginings, which, truth be told, weren't entirely unwelcome. "Ah, the mill. Such a shame it's fallen into disrepair. So much history in Oakhaven. Just waiting to be told," Mrs. Gable mused, her attention already shifting to a new arrival. Elara moved into the quiet solace of the stacks, the familiar scent of old paper and dust a comforting balm. She ran her fingers over the spines of beloved books, a silent communion with the stories within. Her work was her anchor, her sanctuary, but lately the walls of her sanctuary felt a little less confining, a little more permeable to the outside world. It was almost noon when the bell above the door chimed, announcing a new visitor. Elara, busy reshelving a cart of returned novels, glanced up. It was Leo. He stood by the entrance, a worn leather satchel slung over his shoulder, a tentative smile gracing his lips as his eyes met hers. "Good morning, Elara," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble that seemed to settle something restless within her. "Hope I'm not disturbing your work." "Not at all, Leo," she replied, a genuine smile blooming. "Just catching up on some overdue returns. What brings you in today?" He walked towards her, his presence a warm current in the quiet air of the library. "Actually, I was hoping to pick your brain, if you have a moment. I've been doing some digging into Oakhaven's early days, and I keep stumbling upon references to a local historian, an Elias Thorne from the late 19th century. Apparently, he kept meticulous journals. I was wondering if the library might have any of his works or perhaps any clues as to where they might be." Elara's eyes lit up. "Elias Thorne, of course. He was quite prolific for his time. We have several of his published works, mostly detailing the founding families and the early industries. But his journals, those are a bit of a local legend. They were rumored to contain more personal anecdotes, local folklore, perhaps even some unsung heroes of Oakhaven. Some say they were lost in a fire at his estate, others that they were passed down of his family." She paused, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "There was a small collection of his letters donated to the Oakhaven Historical Society a few years back. They might hold a clue." Leo's eyes gleamed with interest. "The Historical Society, you say? Would you happen to know if they're open this afternoon?" "They are, typically," Elara confirmed. "I could even give you a hand. I know Mrs. Henderson, the curator, quite well. She's a lovely woman and always appreciates an extra pair of hands, especially when it comes to dusty archives." The words tumbled out before she could second-guess herself, a spontaneous offer she hadn't planned. A genuine smile spread across Leo's face, warming his eyes. "That would be wonderful, Elara, truly. I'd appreciate the help immensely. This project I'm working on, it's about giving voice to the forgotten stories of places like Oakhaven, and Thorne's journals, if they exist, sound like a treasure trove." "Forgotten stories," Elara echoed softly, the phrase resonating deeply with her own past. "I understand. Sometimes the quietest stories are the most important." They agreed to meet at the Historical Society after the library closed for lunch. The prospect of spending an afternoon with Leo, delving into Oakhaven's past, filled Elara with a delightful flutter of anticipation. It wasn't just the history that excited her. It was the shared pursuit, the quiet companionship that felt so right. After locking up the library for the lunch break, Elara walked a short distance to the Oakhaven Historical Society, a charming, albeit slightly creaky, Victorian house nestled among ancient elm trees. Leo was already there, waiting on the porch, his silhouette framed by the dappled sunlight. He offered her a warm smile as she approached. "Right on time," he said, pushing open the heavy oak door. "Mrs. Henderson is expecting us." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood. The rooms were filled with glass display cases, holding faded photographs, antique tools, and delicate lace. Mrs. Henderson, a spry woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, greeted them with a hearty welcome. "Elara, dear, so good of you to come. And Mr. Maxwell, it's a pleasure to finally meet you properly. Elara speaks highly of your interest in our town's heritage." She gestured towards a back room. "The Thorne collection is mostly in the archives. Be warned, it's a bit of a dusty adventure." The archive room was a treasure trove of Oakhaven's past. Tall metal shelves lined with numbered boxes, old filing cabinets, and a large wooden table piled with assorted papers dominated the space. Elara and Leo donned cotton gloves, and Mrs. Henderson pointed them towards the section dedicated to Elias Thorne. "His letters are in those 2 boxes," she indicated. "And perhaps some miscellaneous writings. We've never had the resources to properly digitize or categorize everything, I'm afraid." As Mrs. Henderson excused herself to attend to another visitor, Elara and Leo began their meticulous work. They carefully opened the brittle envelopes, unfolding letters written in an elegant, looping script. The initial letters were formal, detailing Thorne's correspondence with other historians and local dignitaries. But as they delved deeper, the tone shifted. "Listen to this," Leo murmured, his voice hushed with reverence as he read from a yellowed page. "The heart of Oakhaven beats not in its bustling market or its ambitious new mill, but in the quiet courage of its people. I find myself drawn to the stories whispered by the river, carried on the wind through the ancient oaks. These are the true chronicles, the ones that rarely find their way into official records." He looked up, his eyes alight. He was a storyteller, just like I hoped to be. Elara smiled, a deep sense of understanding blooming within her. He saw the magic in the mundane, the extraordinary, in the ordinary. That's a rare gift. They worked in companionable silence, the only sounds the rustle of old paper, and the soft murmur of their voices as they occasionally read passages aloud. Elara found herself enchanted by Leo's focused intensity, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the quiet passion in his eyes. He wasn't just looking for facts, he was looking for life in the pages. As the afternoon wore on, the light through the high windows softened, casting long shadows across the room. They had gone through most of the letters when Elara's fingers brushed against something unexpected at the bottom of a box, beneath a stack of old newspaper clippings. It was a small leather-bound book, its cover faded and worn, secured with a tarnished brass clasp. "Leo," she whispered, her heart quickening. "Look." He leaned closer as she carefully lifted it out. The pages were edged with gilt, now tarnished, and the leather felt soft and yielding beneath her gloved fingers. With trembling hands, she unfastened the clasp. Inside, written in the same elegant script as the letters, was the inscription, "Coilius Thorn, Private Reflections on the Soul of Oakhaven." "When?" "His journal," Leo breathed, a mixture of awe and excitement in his voice. "You found it, Elara. You actually found it." Elara's gaze met his, a thrill of shared discovery passing between them. The air in the dusty archive seemed to shimmer with possibility. This wasn't just a discovery for Leo's project. It felt like a discovery for them both, a tangible manifestation of their burgeoning connection. They spent another hour poring over the first few entries, captivated by Thorne's vivid descriptions of Oakhaven life, his keen observations of human nature, and his deep affection for the town. He wrote of townspeople Elara recognized from old photographs, giving them voices and quirks that brought them to life. There were tales of quiet acts of heroism, of enduring love, and of small, everyday miracles. When Mrs. Henderson returned to lock up, she was delighted by their find. "Well, I'll be," Elias's personal musings. "Goodness, that's been tucked away for decades. What a keen eye you have, Elara." As they walked out into the cool evening air, the sun dipping below the horizon in hues of orange and purple, a comfortable silence settled between them. The shared excitement of their discovery had forged a new layer of intimacy. "Thank you, Elara," Leo finally said, turning to face her. "For your help, for your intuition. I truly wouldn't have found it without you." "It was an adventure," Elara replied, her voice soft. "And a privilege. Thorne's writing, it's beautiful. I can see why you're so drawn to it." "He reminds me of why I came to Oakhaven," Leo confessed, his gaze drifting towards the distant silhouette of the old mill. "I've always been fascinated by places that hold on to their stories. Places where the past isn't just history, but a living, breathing presence. I spent years in faster-paced cities, chasing deadlines and fleeting trends." He paused, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm trying to write a book, you see. Something that captures the soul of a small town, the resilience and beauty of ordinary lives. Oakhaven, it felt like the perfect canvas." Elara listened, captivated. His words resonated deeply with her own journey. "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I came to Oakhaven seeking a quiet place to heal, a place where the rhythms were gentle, where I could find my own grounding again after a difficult time." She didn't elaborate, but the unspoken understanding passed between them, a shared recognition of past hurts and the healing power of Oakhaven. "And have you found it?" Leo asked gently, his gaze unwavering. Elara looked around at the familiar streets, the twinkling lights appearing in windows, the scent of evening primrose now mingling with the faint smell of wood smoke. "Yes," she said, a quiet certainty in her voice. "More and more, every day, especially lately." Her eyes flickered to his, a silent acknowledgement of his role in that growing sense of peace. He smiled, a warmth radiating from him that chased away the evening chill. "I'm glad, for both of us." As they reached her garden gate, the night jasmine was already releasing its heady perfume. Leo lingered for a moment. Would you be willing to continue our research? Perhaps tomorrow evening. We could look through more of Thorne's journal. Maybe even over a casual dinner, my treat." A thrill went through Elara. "I'd like that very much, Leo," she said, her voice soft with genuine pleasure. "Thank you." "Good night, Elara," he said, his gaze lingering on hers. "Good night, Leo." She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the twilight. As she stepped into her garden, the scent of the jasmine embraced her, but tonight it felt intertwined with the fresh scent of old paper and the lingering warmth of Leah's presence. The silence of her home no longer felt empty, but filled with the promise of stories yet to be told, and a future unfolding, one page at a time. The discovery of Elias Thorne's journal was more than just a historical find. It was a metaphor for the quiet opening of her own heart, a story she was now bravely ready to explore. The next evening, Alara found herself humming as she prepared her small cottage for Leah's visit. She set out her finest yet understated china, arranged a small vase of wildflowers from her garden on the dining table, and put on a gentle classical music station. She chose a simple, elegant meal: roasted chicken with fresh herbs, a vibrant salad, and a light lemon tart she'd baked herself. Every detail was carefully considered, a quiet expression of the joy and anticipation bubbling within her. When Leo arrived, he brought with him a bottle of crisp white wine and a small, carefully wrapped bundle. "Thought this might go well with dinner," he said, handing her the wine. "And this is a small thank you for your incredible discovery yesterday." Alara unwrapped the bundle to reveal a beautifully illustrated copy of one of Oakhaven's oldest maps, meticulously reproduced and framed. "Oh, Leo, it's beautiful," she exclaimed, genuinely touched. "Thank you. It's perfect for the library, or for my study." "I thought it might be," he said, his smile warm. "A reminder of the paths we uncover, both historical and personal." Over dinner their conversation flowed easily, moving from Elias Thorne's intriguing life to their own, more personal journeys. Leo spoke more about his desire to write, his years spent as a journalist in bustling cities, and the increasing pull he felt towards stories with deeper roots. Stories that didn't just report facts but explored the human condition. "I felt like I was constantly chasing the next big headline," he explained, swirling the wine in his glass. "But the real stories, the ones that truly moved me, were often overlooked." Alara found herself sharing more than she ever intended. She spoke of her previous life in a larger city, a relationship that had ended abruptly, leaving her feeling adrift and heartbroken. "I felt like my own story had been shattered," she confessed, her voice soft. "And coming to Oakhaven was about finding a way to piece it back together, to find a new narrative for myself, the library, the quiet rhythm of the town. It helped me heal." Leo listened intently, his gaze kind and understanding. "It takes immense courage to pick up the pieces and start anew," he said gently. "To trust in the quiet whispers of a new beginning. Oakhaven has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Of offering a sanctuary for healing, for finding your own rhythm again?" "It does," Alara agreed, a warmth spreading through her chest. It was the first time she had openly spoken about her past hurts with anyone in Oakhaven, and Leah's empathetic response made her feel seen, truly understood, in a way she hadn't felt in years. After dinner, they settled in Alara's cozy living room, the glow of the reading lamp illuminating the worn pages of Thorne's journal. They took turns reading aloud, their voices blending in a comforting harmony. Thorne's observations were insightful, sometimes humorous, often poignant. He wrote of a hidden spring rumored to grant wishes, of an old woman who communicated with the birds, and of the enduring love between a lighthouse keeper and his wife. One entry particularly caught Alara's attention. The grand narratives of history are often found in the small, intimate gestures between people: a shared glance, a comforting hand, a silent understanding. These are the bricks of true connection, building something far more lasting than any monument. Alara looked up from the page, her eyes meeting Leo's. There was a silent acknowledgement of the truth in Thorne's words, a shared recognition of the quiet connection that was steadily growing between them. He truly understood the essence of a place, didn't he? Leo mused, his voice soft. The heart beat beneath the surface. He did, Alara agreed, her heart feeling full. The evening passed in a blur of shared stories, quiet laughter, and a growing sense of ease. When Leo finally stood to leave, the late hours surprising them both, the air between them felt charged with unspoken emotion. "Thank you, Alara," he said, standing by the door. "For dinner, for the conversation, for sharing Thorne's wisdom with me. It's been truly wonderful." "The pleasure was all mine, Leo," she replied, her voice a little breathless. "I truly enjoyed it." As he stepped out, he paused, turning back to her. "I was thinking," he began, his gaze searching hers. "Thorne mentions an old map, a more detailed one than any we've seen, that supposedly shows the location of that wish-granting spring he writes about. Perhaps we could spend a day exploring, see if we can find any clues in the landscape itself." Elara's heart gave a happy leap. An adventure with Leo. "I would love that," she said, her smile genuine and bright. "It sounds like a perfect Oakhaven mystery." "Perfect," he echoed, his own smile mirroring hers. "I'll pick you up Saturday morning if that works." "Saturday morning sounds wonderful," she confirmed. As the door closed behind him, Elara leaned against it for a moment, a blissful sigh escaping her lips. The cottage felt warm and alive, imbued with the lingering echoes of their shared evening. The scent of night jasmine wafted in through the open window, but tonight it carried with it the faint, comforting aroma of roasted herbs and the subtle, intoxicating scent of possibility. Oakhaven, in its timeless way, was indeed weaving a new, beautiful story, and Elara found herself eagerly anticipating the next chapter, her heart brimming with a quiet, certain hope. She woke with the sun streaming through her window, a soft smile already gracing her lips. The air was crisp, carrying the familiar scent of dew-kissed earth and distant wood smoke, but today it felt brighter, charged with a new energy. She remembered Liam's quiet strength, the warmth of his gaze, the easy laughter they'd shared. It wasn't just hope now, it was a nascent joy, a delicate bud ready to unfurl. Later that morning, as the bakery filled with the inviting aroma of freshly baked sourdough and cinnamon rolls, the bell above the door chimed, announcing a new customer. Elara looked up, her heart giving a little skip. It was Liam, his dark hair a little disheveled, a faint smudge of charcoal on his cheek, but his eyes, those warm, deep pools, were fixed on her. "Morning, Elara," he said, his voice a low rumble that always sent a shiver down her spine. "Smells incredible in here." "Good morning, Liam," she replied, her cheeks warming slightly. "What can I get for you?" He leaned against the counter, a casual grace to his powerful frame. "Just admiring your artistry, and maybe a couple of those apple turnovers, and a coffee if you have it." Their conversation flowed as easily as the coffee poured, talking about the village, a new commission for his forge, a request for a special bread from a local. It felt less like a transaction, and more like a continuation of their evening, a natural rhythm establishing itself between them. He lingered longer than necessary, his presence a comforting weight in the small bakery, and Elara found herself wishing he'd never leave. When he finally did, with a promise to return for lunch, she felt a lightness in her step that lasted the whole morning. This became their unspoken ritual. Liam would visit the bakery, sometimes for a pastry, sometimes for a loaf, always for Elara's company. He'd share anecdotes from the forge, tales of curious villagers, or observations about the changing seasons. Elara, in turn, would tell him about the intricacies of sourdough starters, the joy of a perfectly risen loaf, or the quiet satisfaction of a new recipe. Their worlds, once separate but parallel, began to intertwine. One blustery afternoon, a sudden downpour caught Elara unprepared as she was closing the bakery. She huddled under the small awning, wondering how she'd make it home. Then, a large, oilskin-covered figure appeared, holding an enormous umbrella. "Looks like you could use a lift, Elara," Liam said, his voice muffled by the rain, but his eyes twinkling. He gestured towards his sturdy cart, usually used for hauling metal, now surprisingly clean and outfitted with a thick wool blanket. "Liam, you're a lifesaver," she laughed, hurrying under the umbrella. The journey to her cottage was short, but the proximity in the snug cart, the shared shelter from the storm, felt incredibly intimate. They talked about the rain, about the resilience of Oakhaven's old buildings, and a comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by the drumming of rain on the oilskin. As he dropped her off, his hand brushed hers as he helped her down, and a spark, warm and electric, arced between them. The spark grew into a steady flame over the next few weeks. They began to spend evenings together again, not just in her cottage but exploring Oakhaven. Liam showed her the hidden path to the old mill pond, its surface like polished silver under the moonlight. Elara introduced him to the secret garden behind the vicarage, a riot of forgotten roses and fragrant herbs. They discovered a shared love for quiet walks, for the stories held within Oakhaven's ancient stones, and for the simple pleasure of each other's company. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat by the hearth in Ilara's cottage, the firelight dancing across their faces, Liam spoke of his past, a life lived in a bustling city, a demanding job that left him feeling hollow. "I came to Oakhaven seeking quiet," he confessed. "A place where I could work with my hands, feel connected to something real. I never expected to find more than quiet." He looked at her then, his gaze intense, vulnerable. Ilara's heart ached with understanding. She too had sought solace in Oakhaven, a balm for a heart that had been bruised by a past love that had promised much but delivered only disappointment. "I know what you mean," she whispered. "This village, it heals, it nurtures. And sometimes," she added, her voice barely audible, "it helps you believe in new beginnings." A comfortable silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken emotions. Ilara felt a familiar flutter of fear, the fear of opening her heart again, of trusting this burgeoning happiness. It felt fragile, precious. She had built a safe, predictable life for herself in Oakhaven, and the thought of risking it all for something so beautiful, yet potentially heartbreaking, made her pull back, just a fraction. Liam, perceptive as ever, noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor. He saw the flicker of apprehension in her eyes, the slight stiffening of her shoulders. He didn't press, didn't demand. Instead, he simply reached out, taking her hand in his. His touch was gentle but firm, grounding. "Ilara," he said, his voice soft, "I'm not going anywhere. We can take this as slowly as you need." His understanding, his patience, was a balm to her anxious heart. A wave of relief washed over her, and she squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of her fear and his unspoken promise. It wasn't just about the words, it was about the steady warmth of his hand, the unwavering sincerity in his eyes. In that moment, she knew she could trust him. Their bond deepened further after that evening. They shared more stories, more dreams. Ilara learned of Liam's quiet ambition to restore some of Oakhaven's historical ironwork, to leave his mark on the village in a way that honored its past. Liam, in turn, became Ilara's biggest supporter, encouraging her to experiment with new flowers, to create breads that told stories of Oakhaven's fields and forests. He even helped her build a small, rustic herb garden outside the bakery, their hands brushing as they planted thyme and rosemary, their laughter echoing in the evening air. As autumn deepened into a crisp, golden perfection, Oakhaven began to prepare for its annual harvest festival. It was the highlight of the village calendar, a celebration of bounty, community, and the turning of the seasons. Ilara was busy baking special spiced apple loaves and pumpkin tarts, while Liam was commissioned to create a new ornate iron sign for the village square, depicting sheaves of wheat and an anvil. The day of the festival dawned bright and clear, the air smelling of wood smoke, roasted nuts, and mulled cider. The village square buzzed with activity. Stalls laden with local produce, handmade crafts, and children's games lined the cobblestones. Ilara's bakery stand was a popular spot, her baked goods disappearing as fast as she could replenish them. Liam's new sign, unveiled just that morning, drew admiring glances, its intricate details catching the sunlight. Throughout the day, Ilara and Liam found themselves drawn to each other. They shared a laugh over a particularly competitive game of apple bobbing, sampled each other's wares, and exchanged knowing smiles across the bustling square. There was an easy comfort in their presence, a quiet understanding that didn't need words. They were part of Oakhaven, and now they were part of each other's Oakhaven. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the villagers gathered for the traditional harvest dance. A lively fiddle tune filled the air, and couples began to swirl and twirl under the string lights that crisscrossed the square. Ilara, having finally sold her last loaf, leaned against her empty stall, watching the joyous scene. Suddenly, Liam was there, his hand extended. "May I have this dance, Ilara?" he asked, his eyes soft with an invitation that went beyond the dance floor. Her heart fluttered. She took his hand, her fingers fitting perfectly into his. He led her into the circle of dancers, his grip firm and reassuring. They moved together, not with elaborate steps, but with a natural grace, their bodies swaying to the rhythm of the music. Ilara felt completely at ease in his arms, safe and cherished. She looked up at him, and in the soft glow of the lanterns, she saw a profound tenderness in his gaze, a reflection of the love blooming in her own heart. When the music slowed to a waltz, Liam pulled her a little closer. "Elara," he murmured, his voice low, I think I'm falling in love with you." The words, simple and honest, sent a warm rush through her. It was everything she had hoped for, everything she had feared, and everything she now desperately wanted. "I think I'm already there, Liam," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes glistening. He smiled, a slow, breathtaking smile that reached his eyes. He leaned down, and his lips met hers in a tender, lingering kiss. It was a kiss that tasted of autumn air, of shared laughter, of quiet promises, and the deep, abiding love that had found its home in Oakhaven. The world around them, the music, the dancing villagers, faded into a gentle hum. There was only them, two souls finally acknowledging the undeniable truth of their hearts. After the dance, they walked hand in hand to the ancient oak tree at the edge of the square, a silent sentinel that had witnessed generations of Oakhaven's stories. They sat on the mossy bench beneath its sprawling branches, the cool night air a refreshing contrast to the warmth of their intertwined hands. "Elara," Liam began, his thumb tracing patterns on her skin. "I've been thinking a lot about our future. My future, your future, your future, war future." He paused, taking a deep breath. "This cottage of yours, it's lovely, but it's a baker's cottage, a place for you to create. My forge is a place for me to build, but where is our place?" Elara looked at him, her heart thrumming. "What are you suggesting, Liam?" He turned to face her, his eyes serious but full of warmth. "I'm suggesting we build one, a home, together. There's that old abandoned cottage by the river, just beyond the mill pond. It's been empty for years, falling into disrepair. I've walked past it so many times, imagining what it could be, and lately I've imagined you there." Elara gasped softly. She knew the cottage he spoke of, a charming, if dilapidated, stone structure nestled amongst ancient willows. It had always held a certain wistful appeal for her. "The old miller's cottage?" "The very one," he confirmed, a hopeful glint in his eyes. "It would need a lot of work. A new roof, new windows, floors. But I'm a blacksmith, Elara. I work with my hands, and I have a vision for it. A garden where you can grow your herbs, a porch where we can watch the river flow, a warm hearth for our evenings." He squeezed her hand. "And I want to build it with you, with your creativity, your eye for beauty, your love for this village." Tears welled in Elara's eyes, tears of joy and profound gratitude. This wasn't just an offer of a house. It was an offer of a shared life, a partnership, a dream woven into the very fabric of Oakhaven. It was a testament to his understanding of her, of their combined strengths. "Oh, Liam," she whispered, "that sounds perfect, more than perfect." He smiled, a joyous, relieved smile. "So, you'll join me in this grand adventure?" "With all my heart," she said, leaning in to rest her head on his shoulder. The scent of him, wood smoke, iron, and a hint of something uniquely Liam, filled her senses, a comforting anchor in her suddenly boundless world. Over the next few months, the old miller's cottage became their shared project, a testament to their growing love. Weekends were spent clearing overgrown brambles, repairing stone walls, and planning the layout of their future home. Liam, with his strength and craftsmanship, tackled the structural repairs, his hammer ringing with purpose. Elara, with her artistic eye and green thumb, designed the garden, chose paint colors, and envisioned cozy nooks. Villagers, seeing their dedication and the love that shone between them, often stopped by to offer help, advice, or a warm meal. Oakhaven, as always, embraced its own. As spring returned to Oakhaven, painting the valley in vibrant greens and soft pastels, the cottage began to take shape. It was still a work in progress, but already it felt like home. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the river in hues of gold, they stood on the newly built porch, arms wrapped around each other, watching a pair of swans glide gracefully by. "It's beautiful, Liam," Elara murmured, her voice filled with contentment. "More beautiful than I ever imagined." He kissed the top of her head. It's beautiful because it's ours, Alara. Built with love in a place we both call home. She turned in his arms, looking up at him, her heart overflowing. And this, she said, touching his cheek. This is the most beautiful story Oakhaven has ever woven for me. Liam's eyes, deep and knowing, held hers. And it's only just beginning, my love. He led her back inside to the warmth of the newly laid hearth, where a small fire crackled cheerfully. They sat on a blanket, sipping warm tea, planning the finishing touches for their cottage, their voices soft and content. The scent of fresh wood and plaster mingled with the subtle aroma of the herbs Alara had planted in their new garden, wafting in through the open window. Outside, Oakhaven settled into its nightly slumber, but inside the miller's cottage, a new chapter was unfolding, filled with the promise of endless mornings, quiet evenings, and a love as enduring and comforting as the ancient village itself. Alara leaned into Liam, a blissful sigh escaping her lips, her heart brimming with a quiet, certain joy, knowing that in Oakhaven she had truly found her forever home, and her forever love.